Why I wanted to do it, because I come from really conservative socially background. I was always told that there are certain things women should do. People used to think that me being ambitious is not being a good woman. Basically, I had to fight for my education. When even my dad put me for computer science, elderly people, often they're like, why you are teaching your girl, because anyway she's gonna get married, so she doesn't need to study. So I had to fight a lot. So I always wanted to do something for women, but I want to do something for women from where I come actually. Yeah.
Okay.
Because they don't have exposure. They don't know what life you can have. You need to change the thinking. It's not that people are bad, but it's just the awareness.
I'm Renata Bernarde, a career coach and the host of the Job Hunting Podcast. The goal of this podcast is to support and educate you in the steps you need to take to find great jobs, change and advance your career with confidence and less stress. So make sure you subscribe and follow, and welcome aboard. Hello everyone, and welcome back to the Job Hunting Podcast. It is a very cold Sunday afternoon in Melbourne, and this morning at 8:30 a.m. I interviewed my guest Sonali Shah. Now Sonali and I had booked this interview months ago when COVID was starting, and I cancelled at the last minute because back then I didn't know how to approach the interview. I told Sonali, I think we need time to understand what's going on in the world before we embark in this. And you know what's really hard? Yet again, I have found myself and Sonali in this situation where, as content creator, I have to say, it has to be just in time content creation these days. You can't really batch content anymore. Every week the world seems to be taking a turn to something quite unexpected, and I don't want to ever make you feel like I'm not paying attention to what's going on, because of course I am. And I think on the day-to-day basis, if you follow me on Instagram and if you follow me on Facebook, I am constantly posting and quite alert about what's going on in the world with Black Lives Matter, with COVID, with job losses, with redundancies, with anxiety and the sense of, uncertainty and complexity and real chaos that we are feeling around the world. My commitment is to support the job hunters out there, the people that have lost their jobs during COVID or beforehand, the people that are on the brink of losing their jobs. And in the midst of everything that's going on, I want to be that sounding board, that podcast, that live coaching session every Thursday that is always there for you, that you can rely upon. And that's why we keep on going, and I keep on posting. This week, many people have canceled content. I received 2 cancellations. So I do a lot of personal development training all the time. And 2 things that I was looking forward to doing have been cancelled, quite rightly so, quite frankly. They are not essential in my view. Job hunting, in my view, is essential, and it's people's livelihoods at stake, and people need salaries to pay the mortgages and bills, and I am going to continue producing content as long as people need jobs. And if you have any questions for me, and if you want to address this with me, you can always get in touch. I'd love to hear your feedback, your comments, your opinions. If there are better ways for me to be doing this, I'd love to be in touch. Now let's go back to the topic of today, which is this conversation with Sonali Shah, which is long overdue. And bless her, on a Sunday morning, a woman that has a full-time job, a small child, you won't believe, her work ethic, her commitment, and the amount of volunteering that she does is unbelievable. And when I met Sonali, I was introduced to Lean In org and Sonali by Div Pillai. If you look at my LinkedIn, you will see that I wear many hats. One of them is that I work with diversity and inclusion as head of market strategy for an organization in Australia called Mind Tribes. And Div Pillai is the co-founder. It's an amazing organization, and Div recommended me as a speaker for a final end-of-year event that Lean In Melbourne was organizing. Now, Lean In is a nonprofit organization that was founded by the Facebook Chief Operating Officer, Sheryl Sandberg. And let me get up because I put the book away. So this is the Lean In book that came out 7 years ago, 8 years ago. I read this book. It was a tipping point book for many women back then. It was read right across the board. A lot of women related to it a lot. And it was very inspirational. Sheryl then founded Lean In chapters all over the world. I'll put the link in the show notes so that you can find a Lean In chapter close to you. Lean In Melbourne is a great chapter led by Sonali and a team of 17 volunteers. It's growing and growing. Now that all of their events are online, she was telling me, and you will hear this on the podcast, that they have people participating from all over the world, really. So it's based here, but you can participate if you want to. And I would recommend. It's really quite an impressive group. Sonali was an impressive host, and her team is very professional. It's run by up-and-coming rising stars, females that are young and really ambitious for their careers, that they have felt a strong connection with the book and Sheryl's and learnings. But also, one thing that Sonali explained to me when I first engaged with her is that the Lean In concept has evolved because the ideas have aged, and the book is now 7 years old, as I said before. And things have kind of progressed a lot since then. But also, and as you will see, and one of the reasons why I wanted to bring Sonali as a guest was that we are both CALD women, Sonali and I. So CALD is culturally and linguistically diverse women. That's the acronym. And we're so different. We come from very different cultures. We have different upbringing and different expectations that were put upon us, and we reacted differently to Australia. We're both migrant women. We probably arrived in Australia right about the same age. I'm assuming. I didn't ask, but I'm assuming. So there you go. Like, women are not all the same. But her insight and her intelligence, because of the volunteering work that she does above and beyond her corporate career, is what I find really interesting for me professionally. I'm always interested to hear what she has to say, and I wanted to ask her, but instead of calling her and asking her for me, I'm sharing it on this podcast. How are women feeling? How are they dealing with lockdown? How are you coping? Because she is the best person to ask. She has a young child who is not going to childcare at the moment. They're both, her husband and Sonali, are working from home, and not only she has her personal lived experience, but she's constantly hosting all of these catch-ups and webinars, and she has, a very big social media following with Lean In chapter in Melbourne. And I wanted to ask her about how women are coping from her membership. And it was really also very interesting and wonderful to hear about her personal story, her personal career story, and her ambitions and ideas and inspirations for a better structured future for women in the workforce. So I'd love for you to listen to what Sonali has to say. She's a real feminist with very interesting ideas, like myself, constantly learning as we go. And I'd love for you to learn and educate yourself, but also hopefully see some commonalities there about what she has experienced in her career and what you are going through as well. As always, when I do a podcast that's all about women, I ask the men to keep on listening, because if you are a father of girls, if you are a husband, if you are a manager or a colleague of women, I think it's really important for men to educate themselves and understand how we see the world and how we see our careers and the experiences that we have in the workforce, and how kind of they translate to us. And Lean In Melbourne really encourages men to attend their events, and I saw that firsthand when I was a speaker end of last year. Some wonderful guys came along. So that's, one more reason for you to listen to. And one more thing, I last time I said I was going to be doing all these sort of solo episodes, but because Sonali was keen to be interviewed on a Sunday, and like I said, I didn't want the interview to age, and I think that as a content creator, I have to be careful with that these days. I decided to post it straight away. So next week I will be posting the solo episode that I promise, which is another episode that has a companion live coaching session and a companion workbook, and it will be all about LinkedIn. So keep an eye open for that one. Have a look at the episode show notes to find links to my website, links to sign up to my newsletter and my community to get access to my bonus documents and guidelines and tools that I offer job hunters. And without further ado, here is my chat with Sonali Shah. Bye. So let's start by talking about your career. Now, how did you end up being where you are in Australia, having your corporate job in Melbourne, and working, volunteering with Lean In at the same time? It sounds like such a great combination. I've always wanted to ask you that.
Yes. So career, I come from the technology background. So I was a developer, and that was like an accident. So I didn't have good marks in HSC. So we were looking for, okay, what field I can get into, which will be still useful. And at that time, so this will tell you my age, in India, computer science was basically booming. So it had a lot of demand. And I come from a small town, and we had only one college where they were giving this course. And I had never seen computer before that. But then my brother's professor, we went to him to ask for the advice, what I should be doing. Then he said, I should enroll for computer science. And then I enrolled for computer science. So that's how I got into technology.
Right.
But then when I was studying at that time, we had like some courses. So in India, IT was really in demand. And for that, they required some courses to do. And what I did is, while doing computer science on side, I did those courses. And then I fell in love with programming and technology. And when I came here, I was still software engineer. And then I moved to technical lead role at that time. And I worked with business a lot. And that basically gave me interest into, because technology is kind of application of everyday life, right? Otherwise, technology is not useful. Yeah. So I really loved because I worked in the pricing area. So a lot of data, thinking about, customer demographic, and also a little bit with the contact center. So how, when people call you, what are their problems? And I was really interested into it. So then I moved from technology to business side as a project manager, project lead. Like it was really junior role at that time. And I was really interested in that business side and the customer side. But because I come from technology background, I could always apply my technology knowledge. So although I'm a project manager, I give solutions. It's not like I just sit there managing schedules and the Gantt charts. I love to get involved into details, understand customer, and also bring the technology aspect.
Mm-hmm.
So now what I do is, so I did one, my previous role was customer experience delivery manager. Means looking at, end-to-end customer experience, and providing inputs to how we can streamline all that experience.
Yes.
So I now practice human-centered design thinking, and that's really interesting. And having that technology background is my leverage. So yeah, that's how. And I am kind of like good for project manager fit because I'm like always on schedule or I need to have a plan. So I think that project management field really suits me. I really like that, but also understanding that business, it gives me whole view. I'm not set into, oh, I'm just a product person or I'm
Mm-hmm.
just a technology person. So I get that overall view, which I really love.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
it seems like with the human-centered design thinking and the customer experience thinking, in addition to your background in computer science and development and technology, you have an interest and an appetite for, I would say, the human side of business,
Yeah.
because your involvement with Lean In, I can see that. But, there's from the speakers that you invite, there's a lot of, positive psychology and a lot of Brené Brown and Thrive and all of that that I see in the speakers, and the resilience building and confidence building that I see in the development that you do with the women here in Melbourne.
Yeah.
How did you get involved with Lean In? When did that happen?
So I read book long time ago, because it was there, and actually my brothers asked me to read it. So I knew a book is there. Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
And I hadn't read it, and I was in the US for my brother's graduation ceremony.
Uh-huh.
And they're like, "Have you read it?" And I'm like, "Nah, it might be just regular, feminism thing."
I
And
was
they're
a
like,
late reader. I was a late reader as well, I think.
yeah.
I didn't read.
And yeah, I read the book and immediately I started online group, but I didn't do anything with it because I wanted to do it in a certain way, and I didn't know how to go about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think it took me 1 or 2 years. So I created this group, didn't do anything. And in 1.5 year, I went back and there were already 300 members joined. And then we started discussion how we can start it.
Okay.
And why I wanted to do it, because I come from really conservative socially background,
Mm-hmm.
because I come from a small town in India, and I wasn't allowed to talk to men. Like, so I was in like only women's college, women's school, girls' school. So I was always told that there are certain things women should do.
Mm-hmm.
So if we are at the dinner table, I was told that I have to serve my brothers. So I have two brothers. And if because when you're young, you're like, why you can't take it by yourself? Yeah. You will ask that to your brother. But I was told, now you need to do that. I have to make bed for everybody. I was basically forced into, so in arranged marriage, people come and see you. And I remember in last year of my graduation, I came back from my college and I see like all houses tidy and all that. My mom is ready. And I'm like, what's happening? And she's like, oh, people are coming to see you. And I'm like, no way, because it was like my literally preliminary exam for my last year. And I took key of my motorbike and I just left. And I went to my friend. So
Okay.
these people came and I think they left. So people used to think that me being ambitious is not being a good woman.
Right.
And it basically I had to fight for my education. When even my dad put me for computer science, fees were more than your bachelor of commerce or other courses.
Right.
So elderly people of my family, they got together with my dad and they're like, why you are teaching your girl, because anyway she's going to get married, so she doesn't need to study. So I had to fight a lot. And when I came here, Yeah, here there is a gender gap, like gender pay gap or inequality, but not as much as what I have seen.
Mm-hmm.
So I always wanted to do something for women, and I have been I want to talk it aloud, so I do it that in 50s or when I'm 50, I want to stop my corporate job and do something for women. So it might be charity or it might be not for profit, but I want to do something for women back in
Back.
India, from where I come actually. Yeah,
Okay.
because they don't have exposure, they don't know what life you can have.
Yeah.
When I came here, I realized like what life I can have. So I actually, although I was feminist, I was scared to use that word feminist, feminism. And now when I look back, my values were conservative as well because from where I came.
Yes.
So although I wanted ambitious, I had this thing, oh, women has to do these things because that's how I was raised. And then I realized like you need to change, the thinking. It's not that people are bad, because it's not that I was bad or my parents were bad that they were imposing those values on me, but it's just the awareness. And I used to ask question, and you won't believe, when I was a technical lead or in Suncorp, I was working with one Asian girl. So she was born and raised here, but still her family was very conservative. And
Mm.
we always used to talk about, Indian Asian families and feminism. And at that time, I asked her, I said that, I see women in our office, they work from home so much. They take leaves because of kids, kids are sick.
Yeah.
And still we say that we want same payment, as men. How companies can afford that? I said.
Mm.
So look at this view, right? I call myself feminism. I called at that time, but I asked this question, and she said to me that because she had learned social science, she said that first question we need to ask is why women are working from home more, why women are taking more leave, because men are not pitching in. Yeah, if men are pitching in, women don't need to do that. So
Yeah.
there goes your inequality. Yeah, and then because women work from home more and they don't want to go for leadership roles because of that, they don't get paid as much as men. So anytime you have basically this imbalance and one part of the society has more money, power goes into their hand.
Yeah.
So that's why then women are basically a little bit, suppressed,
Yes.
or they don't have voice in the society to build something. And that changed my thinking.
Mm.
So when I started Lean In, because I'm like, oh, women need to get into work more. That's women's responsibility. Yes, it is women's responsibility, but if you look at the problem is society needs to support them.
Yeah.
So it's not women's issue; it's a societal issue. And my thinking changed a lot when I started Lean In as well. But that was the thing why I started Lean In, because I'm like, I have faced, this issue back home, but here as well, women in tech. So I was in technology. So when you talk to some technology people in infrastructure and all, they assume that you don't know what you're talking about in technology. And I'm sure, like we have, like a lot of data about surgeons and in medical science, it's a similar situation. So that's why I started it. So that's why my group is not about women in tech or women in finance or women in construction. What we do is we talk about issues related to women or gender equality, and we do invite men as well
Yeah.
to participate in it, because otherwise you can't complete the cycle. You need to have their view as well.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's why I started Lean In.
That's great. I like what you said about the issues in society. It's one of the things that I read about the most. Personally, I'm really fascinated by how we live in a society that's structured for men at work, not men and women at work.
Yeah.
And Lean In is one of the books I read as part of this, interest of mine. But one that I really like as well is from a UK consultant called Christine Armstrong. I don't know if you're familiar with this book. It's called The Mother of All Jobs. She has a wonderful book about how we've structured society for men to work, but not for women to work, and how this misalignment of, the times we need to take kids to school against the times we need to be at work just never align, never support women. And summer holidays or school holidays and annual leave and all of that is never really aligned. It makes our life a living hell. Maternity leave instead of parental leave and all of that is really interesting. But what has happened to COVID is that it has allowed everyone to work from home. But I, in my newsletter a couple of weeks ago, or maybe it was last week, I can't remember. I've been sending, I send a newsletter every week to people that are interested in career and job hunting. And a very recent study done in the US and the UK has showed that women have published less papers than men over this past few months whilst at home with their husbands. So these are academic women, right? So we're all at home, but women are still having the wrong end of the stick because men continue to publish their academic papers, but women have held back because the kids are at home. There's, homeschooling kids, taking care of the house, and they have been unable to keep up with the academic work that they would often do. So they have these graphs and charts showing women's academic publications going like steep down during the lockdown and the pandemic. And I wonder if you, because you're in touch with so many women here in Melbourne with Lean In, what have you noticed? How are they coping with the lockdown, staying at home, working from home with little kids? How is it going, even for you personally? I'd be interested to know.
Yeah, see, the thing is, I mean, everybody knows the statistics, right? That women contribute to 76.2% of unpaid work. And that was pre-COVID, without homeschooling, without, childcare closing. So that tells that how this caregiving work has increased right now on women. So if you start with 76.2%, which is literally 3 hours out of 4 hours, unpaid work. And now it must be more than 4 hours now. So you are basically doing 200%, of work.
Mm-hmm.
So I think, luckily, with the group I'm involved in, we do virtual happy hour. We had a couple of workshops, and I haven't heard about women saying it has been like as for their detriment. They say that they're balancing it well. They're enjoying this flexibility, and more than enjoying, because it's a flexibility. They can, if your work allows you to work flexibly, you can get up early in the morning and work even after 5 p.m. And I'm doing the same thing. I literally get up, like me and my husband, we get up at 4 o'clock. And then you have to, right? Because I have 20 months old and I stopped her childcare when she was like in March, first week of March, we literally stopped her from childcare. So we get up at 4 o'clock, I cook, and then I start my work at that time. And everybody in my now team is saying that we clean our inbox in the night, but when we come back in the morning, we have emails from Sonali. So I used to feel initially like, man, I don't want people to think I'm crazy. So I used to, in Outlook, it lets you, schedule the email. So I used to say, okay, this email will go out at 8 o'clock. Then I just gave up. I'm like, whatever, I don't care. So I do some work in the morning. And it's good because nobody interrupts me at that time. During work hours, people message you, call you. So now I have like at least 2 hours in the morning uninterrupted. I cook at that time. So basically my morning routine is clear. Then my daughter gets up at 7:30. So depending on our workload, either my husband will take care of her before 9 o'clock or I'll take care of her before 9 o'clock. And then we just schedule our work like we have now our calendar synced with each other. And if meeting is really important, we send invite like that, like, important meeting. So basically you have to take care of her. Otherwise I keep her next to me. And, she either watches or I just bring her in my lap and, she's in front of video looking at everybody. That's how we are managing. And then in the night, it's the same thing. I put her to sleep and then I go back to work again. But then what happens is, that's what women are saying, that we don't switch off from work.
Yes.
Because during that first 7 to 8 hours, 9 to 5, you might not be able to work full time. And you do feel obliged then, although you're working in the morning and night, like, oh my God, I should maybe do a little bit more. And maybe that's the expectation, I'm not sure. So I have been lucky that my workplace is really good. They support very well. Because I remember a couple of times my CIO called me and my daughter was like crying in the background. And I was feeling like initially, when all these things started, you feel like, and I was new at this job place. So I'm like, oh, I'm so sorry. And he's like, no, we all have kids. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
And now as well in the meetings, sometimes if she's sleeping, it's like just behind me, her room. So you can hear when she wakes up. And then people are like, oh, whose kid is that? And not in a bad way, but they just ask you, right?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, it's my daughter. And then they're like, yeah, that's fine. And they find it cute. So I think this is a new norm, right? Only thing is, I think if you're more pressured, if your husband is not supporting you, that's a problem. So
Yeah.
my husband supports me.
Yeah.
Although we were not meeting my parents-in-laws, like, because of social distancing, they used to come and drop off the food. So once a week, they will give me food for 2 days.
Oh.
That helped me. And now last week, they came 2 days and they took care of her for 3 hours. So that was really good. So I didn't need to work in the night then,
Yeah.
after work, because I could just finish it before 5 o'clock.
Do you
But
think
that's what I'm hearing. Yeah.
Do you think that that's sustainable though? Because it sounds exhausting to me. It
Yeah.
sounds like you're not sleeping much. And how long can you do this for? Or are you doing this now because you know it's short term?
Yes, that's a really good question, right? So I am really bad in managing my time. So I always do overtime. And when I went back from my maternity leave, that's what I did. I didn't have the line. I felt that I need to prove myself because I have come back from maternity leave. I didn't want people to say, oh, because she has kid, she's doing that. So I was literally working 11 to 12 hours and I was burnt out. So I had to quit my job, like emotionally as well. But also I just couldn't take it. I work long hours. So that's my problem. I shouldn't be doing that. But I think what I did is, meanwhile, this social distancing, not meeting people, was getting to me. So what I did is I organized literally Zoom calls with my friends during work hours, because I'm like, I need to talk to somebody because they have kids as well. I started going for a walk. So I used to block my calendar, and I told my manager a couple of times as well, yeah, I need to go out because it's a good weather, and we don't get in Melbourne good weather all the time. So when it's good weather, I take her to the ground and she keeps running. And for me as well, it's good to just go out. So I think as long as you manage that balance, it's always good, right? So I know now when I'm going to get burnout, when I feel down, I tell my husband and I take break. I make sure that on Saturday, most of the time, I get takeaways. I don't cook. My husband takes care of her for a couple of hours, and I just do whatever I want to do. It can be just watching a TV or Netflix, or reading, or going for a walk, or just zooming in with my friends. So I think that's why it's okay as long as you know how to manage it. Yeah. Otherwise, it is difficult. Yeah. If you don't have support and you continuously keep doing it, it is difficult.
Because in addition to work and family life, you still have the Lean In group to manage as well. And tell me a little bit about how they are coping. Are you getting feedback? Because I've noticed you do drinks hour on a Friday. Do you do that?
Yeah.
So what's the feedback that you're getting for the women here in Melbourne about COVID? And have they lost their jobs? Are they still at work? What's going on?
Yeah, so when we did happy hours and we started chatting, yeah, people have lost their jobs. But they found like a silver lining. So it was really interesting to see, because when I did happy hours, I'm like, oh my God, people will be anxious, and we need to have light topics to talk about. And we started like that, but people actually wanted to talk about real problems. And then women on the call said that 2 women actually said that they had lost jobs. But they started practicing literally, textbook method kind of, where if you don't have social distancing, what you would do is meet people for coffee. And, they say that just have a basically routine that every week you're meeting one new person. They said that because they lost job, they started doing that, like reaching out to at least 5 people in a week and having virtual coffee with them. And one actually girl started her Lean In circle in her office, And she said that when they did it, they said that we should have it more often, because I think she was planning to do it every month. And they said we should have fortnightly. So I think people have lost job. It has put more pressure. As long as your work supports you, I think you're okay. And if you have lost job and you have this support circle, which Lean In is, people come on there and they just chat about their problems. We did one workshop which is called I Am Remarkable, and everybody was so open about how they sometimes get treated differently, their problems, not as a woman, but at regular corporate life issues, politics, and if you want to be in leadership, what problems you face.
Mm.
So I think we are talking more of these problems openly now. That's what I have noticed. Before this, because we were meeting in person, I think it's a little bit intimidating when you have group of 90 people. You go and meet everybody individually, and you're not going to meet 90 people. But because it's online, what I'm seeing is more people are joining.
Yeah.
It's easy for them, although they live far away. If they work far away, now they're at home. And interestingly, last workshop we did, Resilience, we had women from all over the world. So we had like from Spain, South Africa, UK, Canada, India, and that was wonderful. So this is kind of silver lining, right? Yes, there are issues, but if you have this support circle, you can get through it.
Yes.
Because nobody can help you financially, but they can tell you how you can get help,
Mm.
or how you can be optimistic. And at least is somebody else like you, and you don't feel like you're the only one, which usually you feel, right? Looking at, like, if you can't meet people, you're sitting at home, you're like, I'm the only one like this. No, you're not. There are so many people, and it's not your fault, right?
Yeah.
You losing job is not your fault. And surprisingly, I know 3 to 4 people who lost their job because of COVID. They have already got their jobs back.
Really?
Yeah,
Wow.
so they applied for jobs, and they already started, or they're starting next week.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
What do you think would be with the group of women that you're involved with, your friends and the Lean In, what would be their biggest aspiration, looking into the future? There's so much uncertainty now, from what you can sense from these talks and these chats. What is it that they want out of this new normal that we're living? What is their biggest ambition?
I think so looking at demographics, it's like two parts to it. One is women without kids, and then women with kids, right?
Yeah.
So if I talk the most, common topic, talk about most common topic, which is women with kids or parents, not just women. I think they think that this new norm will accept children as part of their work, in a way that how breastfeeding at work was a big thing,
Yeah.
getting kids at the parliament was the big thing. I
Yeah.
don't think that will be the case anymore, right? So that's what they expect, that this shouldn't like this lockdown has enabled us to understand these problems,
Mm.
empathize with the people who are parents or single parents. And leadership, I think, has changed as well. So if that continues, I think that's the great win-win situation for everybody, right? So women who want to work from home but also have aspirations of leadership role or managerial roles, and also men pitching in more. So because I was on maternity leave, my daughter was of course bonded to me more, but during this lockdown she's bonded with my husband so well, I don't need to worry about her now.
Yeah.
And it's not like she will always come after me, because first 1 month was difficult. So I think that dynamics have changed, and if that continues, I think that will be a really good outcome for women.
Yeah.
But then women who are like either single or don't have kids yet, for them it's a good setting stone, right? Because we are basically clearing their path, and they don't need to fight about all this working from home and equality at home as well,
Mhm.
because it will be a norm. So when they get married or when they have kids, it's nothing new for them. They don't need to fight. So one less thing to fight or battle for us. So
Yeah.
I think that's the good thing. Because you asked about the experiences from this group.
Yeah.
I was really, so my workplace really supported us very well. So they literally sent, if we wanted, desks, chairs, screens, they sent it home. So I got mine 2 weeks ago. I didn't know they were doing it.
Wow.
And some people went and they picked it up. My manager asked me one on one, "How are you handling it, Sonali? I hope you went out and enjoyed the sunshine." So during work hours, that's the talk.
Mhm.
But one of my team members said that at her workplace, manager was organizing meeting literally at 5 o'clock just to see people are working
Yeah.
lunchtimes. But then over the period, I think that style has changed because from the top down,
Yeah.
they have got instructions that you can't do that. You need to trust people, right?
Yes. Yes.
So I think, and she doesn't even have kids. But if she's single, doesn't mean she doesn't have her own issues, right? Sitting at home alone, especially just think if you're a migrant, you don't have really big social life, it's very difficult.
Yes.
So I think people will show this empathy because it's going to be completely, switch in everybody's mentality and thinking.
Mm.
So I think if we live with this learning and don't change and immediately like now everything back to normal, I think it's a good outcome for everybody.
Yes. Oh,
Yeah,
that's
and the other thing actually somebody said that because it's now social distancing and anyway companies are closed, you are more open for global opportunities because a lot of companies will be like, you know what, I can now hire talent from international market.
yes.
So that's the one thing they're looking at because now you can sit in Australia and get the international experience there, right?
Yes, I'm looking for an example of that. So if you know someone that I can interview and talk to, let me know. Can't wait to see that happening. That
Yeah,
would be a
but
fantastic
you
outcome.
see, the one really good example is so my mother-in-law is in her 70s, and
Mm,
of course my father-in-law as well, and they both had really good career. And I was surprised. My father-in-law told me that he had like a brunch happy hour with his previous colleagues.
okay.
So they are enjoying this. And my mother-in-law, so they were in UK before, and
Yeah.
she's like an artist and dancer and choreographer. So
Hmm.
she had great career there. She built one academy there, and she said that as part of that academy, now they're hosting interviews with artists in UK. But she's able to be part of it now because she can just join online. So art sector will change like this because they were not online that much, right? So I do think that it will change economy and industries, and it will bring the world closer. Actually,
I'd like to say something about that because I was thinking about this yesterday, Sonali. It's so interesting that you mentioned this. I was walking with a friend, and she said we've both been in Australia for over 20, well, close to 20 years now, both of us. And she said, "Oh, I still don't understand Australians." And I do, and I think and I came home and I was thinking about this. I am a third generation expat. I'll get to the point where I want to talk about your in laws. My grandparents lived overseas for 13 years in Washington, D.C. Then mom and dad and my sister and I lived in the Silicon Valley when we were little. And then when I decided to move away from my home country in Brazil and move to Australia, I had all that baggage and I knew what to expect. And even though my husband didn't, I could educate him.
yeah.
And I had very clear rules about, what we could and couldn't do because I knew what would accelerate and what would allow us to quickly get used to this, to being in a new country, and what would really not help us at all. And he was he was a great sort of follower, and he was just like, okay, whatever you say. So he really was, he knew I knew what I was talking about. Plus I was an educational agent and a migration agent in Brazil anyway, so I kind of knew what I was talking about, and he knew that. What I also, when I read Lean In, it didn't touch me as much as I think it touched you, because my mother worked, and even though my grandmothers didn't work, they were very strong feminists. And I also come from a country where women can speak up and women work in Brazil. I don't know how it is now because I've been away for so long, but at the time that I left, like 60% of the households were kept by women. Because women in Brazil, even because it's such a, it still is a relatively poor country, it's easier for women to keep work than men. Men have odd jobs, like in construction, and women have more steady jobs. So when I came here, I actually had a different experience than you. I felt like, where are all the women working? I felt really alone in the workforce. I was like, where's everyone? So what I liked about Lean In, of course, is the fact that because we're women, we're not all the same.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right? Some women decide to have kids, others don't. Some women, decide to marry men, others decides to marry women. We're all so different. But
Yes.
for me, it was like a case study. And I also speak a lot, and I'm super confident. So some of the examples that she showed about women sitting in the back, and not sitting on the table, for me, it was actually the opposite. I am a tall poppy. People had to kind of cut my wings a little bit to fit into Australia, because here we have the tall poppy syndrome.
Yes.
And I'm a Latina. So, my culture is all about, being flamboyant and standing up and all of that. So for me, the book, some of the examples, I remember some of her examples in interviews I thought were like so powerful. When you couldn't ask a woman if she wanted to have kids in an interview. Remember those examples in the book?
Yeah.
I thought those were great. And having those experiences of having moms and grandmothers that have worked, that have, that are pushing you forward, that want you to be ambitious for your career, Probably, I keep thinking that if my grandmother was alive, she would be flabbergasted by what I achieved. I think her ambition for me was for me to be a secretary. Like, I really, because there was this lady called Renata, and she was the secretary of the CEO of the aircraft factory. And she thought I could, because my name is Renata, she thought you could be just like her,
But that's the thing, right? It's not about
Yeah.
being in the workforce, right? Because women have been now in workforce for a long time, and they had to fight for that, right? As well.
Yeah.
But things have changed, so we don't just want to be in workplace. We want equal workplace. We want to be,
Yes. Yeah.
equal number in being in CEOs or in all the board of directors.
Yeah.
I think that expectation has changed, but the awareness about it hasn't changed. Because it's kind of, you can do job, but if you can manage your household, that's a problem. That expectation itself is a problem, right? And I know we always talk about, can women have it all? It's not about can women have it all. It's basically, can working parents have it all? Yeah. Because it impacts men as well as women if you create equal society.
Yeah. You're right. But I'm very interested in the learnings that you get as you grow up by watching family, by watching, if you come from a blue collar background, you're already disadvantaged because you've never seen your parents put on a suit. So if you want a corporate job, it's harder for you to fit in, to interview well, to know what to do. And when I was working at the Institute of Chartered Accountants, my job was career marketing. I was a career marketing relationship manager for Victoria and Tasmania. And I was so passionate about helping those kids that come from regional areas, the sons and daughters of farmers, and they really struggled, to even decide what suit to wear. This was 10 years ago. We don't have that problem anymore. We understand diversity, but it still affects you because it's the bias that we don't, that we don't talk about as much, and we don't understand in ourselves when we're choosing who we want to work with. And I think that it also affects our confidence in moving forward, in being ambitious, in promoting ourselves. If you have my childhood was all about my mother and my grandmothers telling me to be ambitious,
Yeah.
to go for it, to study, and so I never doubted it. It's very powerful, and women have only seen that maybe for one generation.
Yes. And they have seen that generation struggling and stressed out, right? Which is not good example.
Yeah,
Yeah.
men have been having this for many. They've been told that they need to work, they need
Yeah.
to supply for their families, and that they need to be ambitious, and they need to be powerful for centuries.
Yeah.
So it is a very big difference. It probably even affects your DNA. I
Because
don't
it's
know, I'm
very
just guessing.
yeah, it's very interesting you say that, like how you have seen, like for you it's not new thing to be ambitious. From where I come, it's so difficult, right? And not a whole of India is there because like that, because my mother-in-law, like older than me, but
Yeah.
she had good career, her husband supported, but she comes from matriarchal system. So in her state, it's matriarchal system. And what you talked about, what to wear for work. So when I came here, I remember recruiter told me, she's like, "Oh, you should wear like this. You should wear this dress and suit." It was really great help. But the good thing is at my workplace, because I was in technology, it's diverse. Yeah, it's not just Australians. I had like group of like Bosnian friends and Asian, Fijian, and Indian. So they helped me a lot. So I remember there was one Fijian Indian lady, and she was older than me. She used to tell me like mannerisms, how we talk here in Australia, and simple things like I was vegetarian. I don't even eat egg. So if we are going out for team lunches, they used to make sure that they will tell the waiter all my dietary things, and I get almost same food as them, just without meat or egg. And this is so important to understand these issues. But I have worked at places where they didn't understand it. So if I'm asking somebody, "Oh, does this have egg in it?" people will just look at me like, "What the hell?" So
Yeah.
then you do feel like out of place, right?
Yes, yes,
So
yes.
it's very important to understand that diversity and simple things which you said. So really good example is I come from a background. So my mom didn't work, and my dad was in a construction business. And in India, construction business is very hard. So I was never taught to be diplomatic. And no, basically, nobody around me was in corporate life. They had all small businesses. It's very common in India. But my husband, so my mother-in-law, because she was in art, she had to work with academia, but also with government to get the grants.
Yeah.
So she is very diplomatic. She knows how to navigate systems. She knows how to talk. And then my father-in-law, he was also with CSIRO, and he was the first, I think, non-white president of the department.
Wow.
So they both were really successful. So my husband and his brother, when I see them talking, for them it's so easy. Like navigating and saying the same thing which I want to say, but in a more diplomatic way, using the correct words. So I come from non-English background.
Yeah.
So for me to think like them is very difficult, and especially the choice of words. So at work, sometimes I do get into trouble because I'll say something and people are like, maybe I should have chosen different word.
I know.
Yeah, but even the way I talk, right?
Yes.
So it does matter a lot. And that's why with Lean In, my main thing was, so when I started, I'm like, oh, women need to build soft skills. And then I realized, no, women don't need to build soft skills. They need to just know that it's not just working hard and knowing technical part of your work is important, but all the other things, negotiation and diplomatic. How do you basically be diplomatic to get what you want? All those things matter in your career. It's not how smart you are and how hard you work. That's like only one part of
Yeah.
success. And that's why all our events are around that. It's not about just giving technical knowledge to women, And understanding diversity, that's the main part, because if we create awareness as women, I think we will help each other. So Lean In promotes that a lot. So they have like women with color, and especially with Latina women and Black women, because in the US it's a big problem.
Yes, yes.
So they promote that a lot. They have also started campaign for men, so Lean In Men actually. So you know how you can get mentorship from men, because after Me Too, men were a bit hesitant to give mentorship to women or meet with them in the
Oh,
cafe, restaurants, like that.
mm,
So they have that campaign as well. So it gives like you tool to address all the issues and at every level, because you can't have one solution to fix the problem. You need to look at
yeah.
everybody's problems are different.
Yes. Now that we could go on and on, couldn't we? Look, I really want to end by saying I'm so glad we met. I'm so glad that you invited me to speak end of last year. I've done so many events in my life. That one was so well done. And when I think it was a bunch of volunteers and of course, the corporate partner, but it was like really lovely. And the women in attendance were all so, people just wanted to be there,
Yeah.
right? And they were not told to be there. They didn't have to come. It was, evening. They could be home with their families. And it just shows that you and your team, because I know you have a great team as well, you're doing such a great job. So I'm so glad that we finally caught up for this. Thank you so much for being such a great guest. And I hope that we can catch up again soon and have a proper coffee and a walk.
Yes, thanks, Renata, and thanks for having me, as
My
part of your
pleasure.
podcast.
My
I'll
pleasure.
catch up with you soon.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye bye.